Hello, everyone. Welcome to Book Soup. My name is Dan. Thank you all for being here tonight. We are delighted to be hosting Richard Armitage in conversation with Bryan Fuller discussing his new novel, Geneva. First, housekeeping note. A couple of housekeeping notes. Please silence your cell phones during the discussion. No one wants to be that person. After the talk, we're going to have a sign at the back desk. Richard will sign books back there. We have made it easy for you. We placed tape along the floor to kind of guide you. So we're going to run the line up this way and then past the information desk. If we haven't given you a Post-it note yet, we will come through the line. We'll do that as you're queuing up. And now a few words about our special guests. Bryan Fuller is a screenwriter and television producer. He has created numerous critically acclaimed TV series, including Dead Like Me, Wonder Falls, Pushing Daisies, and Hannibal. Hannibal. He's been a featured writer on several installations of Star Trek franchise and is the creator of the most recent series, Star Trek Discovery. Tonight he's in conversation with our special guest. Richard Armitage is an award-winning stage, screen, and voice actor, and the author. He received recognition in the UK with his first leading role as John Thornton in the British television program. His role as Dorothy King and later Thorin Oakenshield in Peter Jackson's trilogy adaptation of The Hobbit brought him international recognition and earned him a Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actor. Richard played the leading role in The Stranger, a Netflix miniseries, created by the #1 New York Times bestselling author Harlan Coben. Geneva is a fiction debut, which was in London and New York City. Please join me in welcoming Bryan Fuller and Richard Armitage.
Hi, everybody. Who's read the book?
Yes.
Okay. I worked with Richard almost 10 years ago. And yeah, it's a while. And one of the things that was immediately evident by the way Richard tells stories is that he has a visual vocabulary for everything. He sent me so many pictures about Francis Dollarhide and what Francis Dollarhide's mindscape would feel like and what his physicality would feel like. So he's very visual in how he communicates story. And I have found with this book, which I'm a third of the way through. I haven't finished it. I got some spoilers upstairs, but I'm not going to share them. One of the things that I wanted to ask you first is just how visual the book is and how important cinema is to your writing.
I mean, I think I've collected a toolkit of things over the years from my time as a dancer originally. So that kind of physical embodiment of character, which starts as a feeling and then ends up as a visual expression, into being a musician, which gives you that kind of rhythm in writing and in reading as well. And I think both of those things helped me shape story, because this was originally only ever going to be heard as an audiobook. So the whole kind of beginning of this was about what it was going to sound like rather than what it was going to look like on the page. But I think I've realized over the years, I think in cinematic terms, you're only ever inside your own head. So you don't know how other people learn or receive story. But yeah, I think I've always been a visual learner, and yeah, I saw the movie of this and then wrote it down.
Well, just the opening, my mic is louder than your mic. I feel like is yours on? Yeah. One of the things that I love about the book is it harkens back to an era of techno thrillers from the 70s, aging myself a little bit, with my first thought was it's a little bit Robin Cook and it's a little bit Michael Crichton without the hard science fiction, but kind of a 5 minutes from now science fiction. And there is something about characters like in the 70s we would call them the lady doctor in danger kind of thrillers, and this falls into that trope that's very Coma, very Jean-Pierre Rougeau. And did those movies, that's kind of 70s paranoid thriller, was that always your intention?
Yes, when you mentioned coma, I immediately got a kind of physical reaction. I guess I'd seen it as quite a young kid, but it terrified me. Michael Crichton is somebody that I've read as well as obviously seen, but that toes on the line of science fiction, which is close enough to touch, they're the rabbit holes that I really enjoyed falling down. But at the time that the story was being conceived in my head, we were sort of coming to the end of the pandemic, and I was watching a lot of male politicians sort of stumbling their way through misinformation. And there was a scientist called Sarah Gilbert who was fronting the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine program in the UK, and I got really fascinated with taking her story and making a drama about it. But what I did was use her as a foundation for somebody with an incredible intellect who you put them onto thin ice and they start to doubt their own mind. So I guess, yes, in terms of the science fiction becoming science fact, but going further back to the 50s, I'd actually seen a film as a kid that I couldn't remember the name of, and I had to sort of type in this very long paragraph of the thing that frightened me about it. And it was a film with Gene Simmons called So Long at the Fair. And it basically is about this gaslit relationship with a woman who checks into a hotel, and they convince her that she was here on her own as she turned up with her brother. So that idea of somebody not being able to trust their own mind, I find terrifying. So yeah, it was a big seed of inspiration for the story, for sure.
Yeah, perception and point of view play a big factor in how you tell the story, and having an unreliable narrator as your protagonist is really exciting territory as a storyteller. You talk about just the idea of how the story progresses and how the perception of a reality really affects the paranoia and the thriller aspect of the genre.
I mean, that was one of the reasons why I was quite determined to write it as two first-person perspectives, because I was really interested in the idea of gaslighting, but also that Sarah was unable to trust her own mind. So what we would see or hear in the book was Sarah's version of events and then Daniel's version of events. So you could see the shift in that. So it was almost like, I mean, there's a scene. There's a moment where Sarah is sort of standing in a doorway. You don't know if she's having a nightmare or whether it's actually happening to her, and she's sort of seeing herself. I've had these dreams, you know when you think, did I just astrally project? Because I remember really clearly as a kid kind of coming back into my bedroom and seeing somebody in my bed, and it was me. And I was obviously having a crazy kind of, it was terrifying to me. And that also that feeling of whatever the term is, where you have sleep, where you're awake but your body doesn't wake up.
Sleep paralysis demons.
So I guess I've fed all of those things into the story, which is sort of little personal experiences for me, as well as kind of fear of water, all of those things where you kind of get this kind of panic, I guess, but it's more of a feeling that I just thought I'm going to weave that into her kind of twisted psychology of what's happening to her and what's really happening in the world. So yeah.
Did you plot it out as to like a reality and a perception of reality? How did you plot it?
I plotted it with what Sarah's story was going to be, and obviously without spoiling it, Daniel is really sort of driving her physical life, and she's interpreting it through her perception of what's happening to her, because the concept is that he's luring her out of retirement to go to Geneva to promote or to endorse this revolutionary, controversial neural implant. She has stepped away from her career as a Nobel Prize-winning scientist, but with her endorsement, the neural implant could potentially become a success. When she gets to Geneva, she starts to exhibit the first signs of Alzheimer's. And so her endorsement is questioned. It's like she has this agenda. So Daniel's driving that, Sarah's receiving it, which was interesting to sort of see her kind of slowly decline mentally.
Who's listening to it on Audible? Should we do a little Audible Jam right here with Richard reading a chapter?
I can certainly do that. Finally enough, I've got something ready. So this is Daniel, quite early on in the story, beginning to understand what Sarah's going through. What's happening to me, Dan? Don't worry, love, I'm right here with you. You've had a really tough day and we haven't stopped. It's understandable you're tired. It's my fault. Traveling and then the event, not to mention hearing all about Neurocell. It's pretty overwhelming. Sorry I put pressure on you. I decide not to mention the diagnosis. Her eyebrows crease and she turns her face into the pillow, seeking comfort. Her voice is muffled and the words are swallowed, but they hit me like a slap in the face. What's Neurocell? I wasn't expecting her to be so confused so quickly. She's losing her grip. Things are unraveling faster than I thought they would. I need to hold on to her. I need her to be calm and clear. I need her focused. Nothing for you to worry about, Sarah. Just go to sleep. I roll the duvet into a cocoon around her and make my way to the bathroom, feeling grim. My stomach is twisting into knots and I'm starting to panic. What are we doing here? Why did we agree to come? I should be looking after her, not making things worse. Breathe, Daniel. Losing your head now isn't going to help anything. I glance up to the mirror. Spanning the glass is something I hadn't noticed before. A large crack running from one side to the other. It splits my face in two. Was that there before? I watch my eyes and then look down to my mouth and my neck. My upper chest rises and falls, breathing heavily. My mouth is showing one face, my haunted eyes another. Two halves of the same person, split across the middle, divided. He knows, that man. He knows damn well what's coming. Coward. I just realised it's quite similar to Dohy looking in the mirror. Isn't it weird how it sort of just infuses your kind of subconscious?
Well, you were knee deep in that role, or I'd say neck deep in that role. I remember you saying that it took a while for you to shake it.
It did, and I remember talking about we were talking about music a minute ago, whether it's soundtracks or visuals, and I remember when I was preparing for that, every morning I would sit in the makeup chair listening to the soundtrack to Under the Skin by what's the composer? Mika Levy.
Mika Levy, yeah.
And it would terrify me so much that when I stopped listening to the music, I could kind of still hear it in my ear, which is the whole point, because you know the cacophony on set, you need that sort of focus. But yeah, it's still frightening me today. But yeah, those kind of things do. Like I've got the soundtrack to this going on in my head.
What's the soundtrack to this?
It's a little bit of Mika Levy and a bit of Max Richter as well, I think.
Oh,
wow. But maybe we can afford to hire him.
Michael Levy is amazing. Is everybody familiar with Under the Skin and that score?
And Jackie as well. Did he do Jackie? I think
she. I think Micah's.
Oh, sorry. She.
Yeah. I don't know. I just I wasn't as obsessive with Jackie as I was Under the Skin. I saw Under the Skin 4 times in the theater, and Jackie I saw once at a screening.
Okay.
It's not my day. So can you identify the division in your brain, storyteller brain, between actor and writer, and what tools you used as an actor to write?
I think obviously when you're acting, you're focusing on one character and you're preparing yourself to live inside the character, looking out at the world, which is lovely because you just get to pour all of your creative energy into one creation. As a writer, you have to take care of all of the characters. So you have to put yourself inside of, I had to put myself inside of Sarah and inside of Daniel and inside of Pavel, all of the characters, and then step outside of the world. But one of the things that I've always enjoyed about great writers and great screenwriters is when they prepare a character which is interesting and then stress test them because of the plot. So there is the concept of plot, and a lot of television writers can get obsessed with plot and forget really about character. And sometimes, as an actor on set, you'd be putting your hand up, going, "Can we just sort of calibrate the character within the plot? Because the plot's great, but if the character isn't being kind of broken by it, then I'm not as interested." So being inside and outside was quite useful. And again, that cinematic brain of seeing how long form television develops from a first concept into multiple series and big story arcs, and seeing how they succeed and how they fail. Because I remember on my second season of Spooks in the UK, we had an idea for the show, but we started with 1 page of script, and I remember thinking, you've got to plan, you've got to get all of your hooks, all of the shape of the story in place before you start. So I couldn't fly by the seat of my pants writing this. I had to plot everything out. And also on a daily basis, seeing that call sheet, shooting out of order, having headlines of what was going to happen in a scene and what needed to a little description of what was going to happen. That's how I wrote it, with chapters, headline, and what needed to happen. So I guess those were my tools.
And did you write in order, or did you understand scenes that were tent poles of the story, flesh them out, and then go back? How did you approach the writing process?
I did write in order, but there were certain chapters that felt a bit like shoe leather that I needed to write them in order to get to the scenes that I really wanted to write. And I knew exactly what those scenes were, and I was sort of almost salivating over that process. And I did jump ahead at some point and just started crafting the really juicy moments. I mean, in a way, that's another thing I've picked up over the years as an actor, is that often you take a role because of one scene in an entire show, in an entire 10 episodes. There's one scene that sells you on the role. Like, I cannot wait to play that scene. I don't know if I can play that scene. So there were chapters in this that I just couldn't wait to write.
Which ones?
The meeting between Terry Landau, the medical blogger, and Sarah, and of course the big denouement when Sarah finally finds out what's happening to her without spoiling it, and who's done it to her.
And when you were writing this, did you imagine it being adapted for television or movies, or was that a goal at all? Because it reads like a script. It reads cinematically, with more detail because it's a novel.
No, I mean, when I was writing it, it was only ever going to be an audiobook. There was no intention. I mean, maybe there was a little wish in the back of my mind, I would love for this to be printed. So when that came along, it was a delightful surprise. And then, of course, once you have a manuscript and that gets shopped around, and then producers like it and pick it up and option it. So that's happened. But yeah, at each step of the way, it's a bit of oh, you like it, you're gonna develop this. But as I won't write the screenplay. I doubt. I've got just far more brilliant people in the world that can do that.
Movie or TV?
Television. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I've loved about my work, is that movies are the sort of holy grail, but having that length of time to piece character together, and I just love an end of episode hook, and I think I've sort of subliminally written end of episode hooks into
the chapter hooks.
Yes, yeah, and the chapter hook. I get, which in a way is a kind of sonata form. You've got prologue and your sort of 3 acts and a coda, which sort of, I think, makes for a great 6 to 8 episodes television series.
It feels like it's almost, you've done your 10,000 hours of script reading and performing and working in television and film, that the cadence of those stories seems very clear. It feels like you've spent time in a writer's room.
I've sort of spent accidental time in some people's writers' room, not necessarily invited in, but actually working on some of the Netflix shows with Harlan Coben, watching how he gives over his own writing, and he's executive producing it, but he's also not very precious about the work. He loves the moment when someone comes in with a brand new idea and crafts this unexpected subplot, and he gets very excited about that. So I've really, he's been a bit of an unconscious mentor to me, and I've surreptitiously asked him questions that he's answered, not really realizing why I've asked it. But yeah, working on those 3 Netflix shows has been a real learning curve, and of course.
One of the things that we see with shows that have to do with the pharmaceutical industry or any sort of technical industry around health, they're often played as the villains, and it feels like it's a low-hanging fruit to make the pharmaceutical companies the villains, and I don't feel like you're doing that.
Well, I guess I did conceive of the idea of a Neurocell based on, obviously, Elon Musk's Neuralink, which at the time of writing was just a sort of distant blog. It's now in human trials. Also, Alzheimer's medication has suddenly taken a leap forward in the interim of writing this. But I think that a technology such as this will be developed for, combating, dementia. But that there will be a whole body of people out there desperate to get their hands on it for data collection and mind control. So, but I did like straddling that world of this is being financed for the greater good, but it could become a kind of Bond villain's tool.
Right. But you didn't do the Bond villain route, which I appreciated. It's more individual.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the Schiller Institute, I did a little road trip to Switzerland just to sort of recce. This was after writing, actually. I did a little recce of, I wanted to make sure all of the journeys were correct, and I found the hotel that I was writing at. But I also found the site for the potential Schiller Institute, which I guess did have a sort of Bond-esque lair, but actually the guy that runs it, Mauritz Schiller, his reason for developing the neural implant in the first place was because of an accident he'd had. So he is developing it for the right reasons rather than the nefarious reasons.
As you're, we are living in a kind of heightened paranoid world right now, and this does feel like it is prescient in many ways. Was there anything? Do you have a personal experience with Alzheimer's or dementia that has affected you, that made you want to write the story with Sarah?
I did have a couple of friends, quite close friends, whose parents were going through this condition, and I didn't probe too much because I felt like it was too personal, but I do a lot of listening, and I picked up some anecdotes, and I felt like the human side of Alzheimer's was as interesting as the medical side of it. So I did do a bit of research into the medical stuff, but it was more the small anecdotes. Like there's a thing in this that I did alter it slightly, but a friend's parent had sort of tried to cook some food with which was still in a plastic Tupperware box, and had sort of placed it on the stove and it melted. And those little anecdotes that you pick up, and I just thought it's those things that just break your heart. And Sarah needed, or the reader, the listener needed to understand what Alzheimer's felt like to her, so that when she gets diagnosed, it's this sort of shattering of herself, because she knows what she's about to face. So it was the human side of it I was most interested in.
With her and seeing what happened with her father and feeling that she's going down the same road.
Yes, and I think that dawning realization of nursing somebody with it and realizing this is going to happen to me, I think was crucial to sort of humanizing her as well, because you're already starting. I mean, that's in the first 10 chapters. Just this, she's kind of carrying a fracture inside of her already before she's even got into this story.
But it sets up the thriller aspect of it brilliantly, because she knows exactly how fallible her perception of events is, and it puts her down a road that we're rooting for her and can relate to her, but she is definitely on her own.
Yeah, and also it's quite a strong driving force to actually get her to Geneva, because she, at the back of her mind, she's thinking, if this neural implant is successful, maybe it will help my father. I mean, I don't think she directly makes that connection, but there is something in her that's like, I've got to do this for my husband and for everybody else experiencing this condition. So she it gives her a bit more of a heroic quality as to why she goes.
She's a great hero and a great character.
I'm not finished with it.
Well, that was my next question is, where does the story go? You talked about cliffhangers.
You know, it's interesting because I got to the end of it and I thought, did I just write a central female character who was largely reactive because so much has happened to her? And I felt like I wanted to see her in a different story where she's much more the driving force. We just talked about that upstairs. Because, you know, I wanted to see her kind of own herself again. I don't want to spoil the story, but I can't, yes, I'm not finished with Sarah. That's all I can say.
Have you started your next novel, or where are you at?
Yeah, I've started a second story, and I'm going the same route, which is an Audible original. It's a standalone story, actually. It's not a second Geneva. It's called The Cut, and it's about a crime trauma that happens to a group of children and how it distorts their journey into adulthood. And that's a little bit closer to home. It's all set in the Midlands in England. So, but if I did write a second, this would be the third one. Audible might let me write. Yeah, we'll see.
Should we open it up for questions from folks? Are we at the half-hour mark? I want to be good with schedule.
We definitely have some questions from our online audience as well.
Right.
Who, if you just want to like pepper those in.
Sure. Okay. You want to be first? What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Now you're not first.
That's tricking me. Okay. I guess, is it okay if we ask about something that's not Geneva? I really enjoyed hearing you talk about it. You heard a lot of cheers for your role in North and South, and so there are a lot of North and South fans here. And the 20th anniversary is coming up next year, which is sort of maybe hard to believe now. But I guess I wanted to hear more about, you spoke right now about the way you take on a character and you dive in, and you want them to be stressed under, put under stress. So if you wanted to talk about that in terms of some of your other roles, particularly North and South, love to hear it. And also, sorry, just my only chance, we would love to see something for the 20th anniversary. So I don't know if anything's coming up, an interview, something.
Do you know, I have asked Audible if I could do a new version of it. The question is in the air at the moment. It hasn't landed on any ears. But I do think that maybe there was a recent version of it. So
It's quite a few years old now.
But no, I would love to read that. And we were talking about this earlier, that a lot of the passion I've had for shows that I've done have largely come from adaptations from books, and I love that. I remember exactly where I was when the message came through that I was being asked to audition for North and South. I drove to my local bookshop and went in. They had one copy left, and I sat in my beat up old blue Ford Fiesta and just read the blurb on the back, and I just thought, I have to do this. But it was so unlikely that the BBC would ever cast me. And they went around this. I was one of the first people to audition, and then one of the very last, because the casting director, Jill Trevelyan, went back through all the tapes looking for the person that they was somehow, and they couldn't find the person to play it. And so thank you to casting directors that do that. But it was, I don't know, it's like when something resonates with you, and I love that moment. We had it with Thomas Harris's book as well. You go in and you find out these tiny, tiny pieces that you can never get that from just a script. And I sort of love bathing in the words of a novelist.
We have so hi Richard, there's a distinct rhythm to your writing style for Geneva. Have you ever written poetry? Blushy smiley face.
Is that the person's name? Blushy smiley face?
No, that's just no. This is from Buffy 101.
I've never written poetry, but I've used it a lot for characters. So, for example, on Obsession, I used a lot of Ted Hughes poems, particularly one called Love Song that I was convinced the writer must have read. A lot of plays that Chekhov is very poetry based, but in terms of rhythmic writing, I think it's partly to do with being a musician and also as a reader, reading thriller. when you are kind of driving towards the sort of climax, and when the writing's great, and same with dialogue. Same with dialogue. Sometimes it can really trip you up if there's too many syllables in a word or too much expression in the sentence. Like, you know, as you become more agitated, the rhythm of the sentence gets compressed. And I really, because I was reading everything aloud in order for it to be an audiobook, I just paid attention to all of that.
Did you, how soon did you have Nicola Walker as your counterpart in the story? When you read those sections of your book, are you hearing her voice?
No, Nicola came quite late, actually. There was a very short list of actors to read, and I sort of stepped back from that because I didn't just want to say, you know, cast my friend. But there was one scene that she remembered and called me after the recording and said, that was really similar to a scene we played together in Spooks. And I hadn't realized it was somehow in my subconscious. And it was just a coincidence that she happened to be the reader. I'm not going to tell you what the scene is because it will spoil it for you. But it just dawned on me, like, these people that come into your life. And that was back in 2007, I think I did Spooks. It just sort of marinated in the back of my head, and it was a complete coincidence. But I listened to Nicola's reading, and she made it so much better than what I think was actually there. And I was listening to it thinking, I didn't know this. She just elevated it. I mean, she's such a great actor. So when I come to read other people's writing now, I'm like, okay, you've got to really take responsibility for this author's words. You know?
Yeah. You don't need to get too far into your book to notice that as you write, your style, you write very much in the first person, which you address briefly, but you also write in the present tense. I fall in my bed and I go to sleep instead of I fell into my bed. And it's just a curiosity. I wonder if that was a deliberate artistic choice or if that's just something quintessentially how you write.
No, it's not actually, and I'm sort of struggling with that at the moment because in my second book.
Sore subject.
No, not at all. But it has been a question, like, because it's really satisfying writing in first person. But in order for it to feel like it's happening to the listener right now, hearing Sarah, present tense first person is the most impactful, I think, because it's happening to her in the moment that you're listening to it, rather than her recalling something that happened either hours ago or months ago. So at the moment, I'm writing the present for the second book. I'm writing the present tense in the past tense, the present story in the past tense, and the past story in the present tense. So enjoy.
I have one. What was the most challenging part about writing Geneva, and what was the most fun?
I think the most challenging part was those first notes coming in from the editor, because I had completely overwritten the book. I was trying to prove how intelligent I was and that I was definitely a writer, and she sort of got hold of it and went, you're going to lose the audience in the first few minutes of this. You need to strip all of this away, dump it, and come back with something a bit more kind of immediate. So that was a struggle, but it's a little bit like the first time a director says, don't do all of that other stuff, just say the line and say it truthfully. Which the first time you get it, it ruffles your feathers, but then you think, right, actually, we need to simplify this. But I suppose what was the other bit, the most fun bit?
The most fun. That's not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Okay, the most fun bit is writing a scene where Daniel has an accident on a ski slope, because I just based it on something that really happened to me. And I can't wait to film it.
I saw you back there.
I'm picking up all of your audiobooks as well. One of my favorites is the way you learn more about your both the record, especially for Puss in Boots, which is such a fun story, and I absolutely enjoy it.
Angela Carter. I mean, amazing. I mean, she's one of those people that is both poet and novelist. And there was another one, I forget what it's called, where the girl is experiencing her puberty in the body of a wolf. It's extraordinary. I mean, that's Wolf Alice. That's it. Incredible writing, like really like vivid, visceral, impactful writing. So yeah, I mean, her bar is incredibly high. But you do absorb, you take some of that kind of bold bravery in sort of description, and yeah, I'm a big fan of Angela Carter.
Do we do internet question, and then we're alternating?
Okay. Richard, are you planning on writing a memoir in the near future?
I doubt very much whether I'll but I think my goal somehow is to, yeah, I'm not interested in my own story, never have been, but big pieces of yourself fall into the work you do. It's already in the work I've done, but maybe it'll come out a little bit more in writing.
So, first of all, congratulations on publishing success. How will that impact your production company? And for that, if you have any plans to be back on stage, I know a lot of us sad to miss the Vanya. Just wondering how that's going to impact the general other participants.
Yes to going back on stage, probably 2025. I feel like I've become a bit of a thorn in the side of my colleagues who I'm producing other pieces with now, because I feel like having a book published somehow made, which, my voice was there in the room, but it has a bit more validity to it. So I'm working with a really experienced scriptwriter that came from a really successful television show in the UK called Emmerdale, and a first-time writer. And I think, having experienced the sort of pitfalls of writing, I'm able to absorb both situations, and actually I think it's helping me work with the first-time writer more than anybody else, because I sort of know what she's going through. So it feeds into it and informs what they're doing, and I think it helps me to see the big picture of an 8-episode series with, you do carry a lot of story in your head, so it's helping me.
Here's more of okay. Richard, how is meeting your well-wishers at book signings different than meeting them at the stage door?
Usually at the stage door, you've done 2.5 hours or 3 hours of a play, so it's you're a little bit exhausted, so you're always a bit embarrassed about how you look. The book tour has been amazing, and it's actually nice that people have got something to put a signature on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Also, just reconnecting with old friends, and the writing community has been a revelation to me, because what I hadn't realised were all, everybody reads each other's work, and they kind of come, and it's a tight community, and I think a lot of the audience have been writers, first-time writers. So I've really appreciated that.
Great.
I wanted to know a little bit more about the progress on the Jackman and Evans series, and then I also was really taken by how you have your Daniel especially address the fourth wall, where he's not just thinking in his head, but he's like talking to the reader sometimes, and I was interested in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer the second part first, because one of those scenes that I was really excited about writing, that I just couldn't wait to do, was when you're writing in first person, each chapter potentially becomes a confession. So I knew that Sarah was going to be confessing to her state of mind and telling the audience directly what she's going through, and Daniel would also be confessing to his listener. And again, because it was being designed for audio only, it's very personal, one-to-one. I'm just talking to you. I'm going to tell you what's happening here. So that was thrilling to write. In terms of Jackman and Evans, so the very experienced writer that I just referred to, we've got 2 draft episodes. This is a series by a crime writer in the UK called Joy Ellis, and I've just recorded book 10. I recorded her first one, and I've just recorded 10. So that's how long it takes to develop a TV series. And obviously everything has been in sort of deep freeze because of the strike situation. So, we're hoping to kind of get it up and running next year.
Hi, Richard. Do you have a dream project? Something that's really a passion project, like a movie, film, television, theater that you'd love to do in the future? Good question.
Geneva. six episodes. You know, on a big streamer, that'd be nice.
What's are people circling, or like, is it optioned? Is it?
Yes, yeah, it's optional. I'm not allowed to say, am I? Can I?
If you're not allowed to say, you can whisper.
No,
to
I
me
can.
and
I
can
can
say it. Oh, well, yeah, that's a studio.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll tell you maybe in the near future. But yeah, it has been optioned by
That didn't count as
Okay.
one in the room.
Hi, Richard. Just wanted to say that I'm so excited to receive my copy of my book. Also, who would you say are your biggest inspirations when it comes to writing? Would you consider writing more of a thriller horror book, a series?
So yeah, thriller horror. I feel like there are people out there that do this so much better than me. Angela Carter's in that category. I mean, hers isn't horror, but it's in that sort of dark, kind of graphic, gothic area. What was the other question?
What were your biggest
writing
inspirations?
So it's very rare that I get to read something purely for pleasure. It's always work related. But when I do, I love Robert Harris. I'm a bit of a Ken Follett fan. But Robert Harris, I've got V2 sitting on my side. I was a massive fan of Archangel, Fatherland. So anything which, again, I think it's that something that is a what if that feels close enough to it being a reality, but it is completely fictional based on real historic events. I get a real kick out of that stuff. Michael Crichton. Yeah.
The room.
Oh, there we go.
So in my practice, so I'm an attorney, and I do like elder law, and so a lot of that means that I get appointed by the court to go out and represent dementia. They're basically in the process of undergoing conservatorship. And so one thing that I have noticed, I've been practicing for 5 years now, and I feel like I've just continued to learn more about dementia, Alzheimer's, and I continue to be surprised at how these things develop, how one person experiences it, and it's different from the experience. 10 years that are missing. They think they're a certain age, 10 years younger than they actually are, or other things. So did you spend any time with people who have these types of disorders? What was your research project or process like? Did you spend time with people? Did you just research online? What did that look like?
Aside from, I mean, it's not a diagnosis of dementia, but seeing my own parents in a form of decline, but particularly, I had two close friends who I spent some time with. One of their parents, who's their mother, and I knew her very well. And seeing her, like you say, losing these big chunks of quite recent memory, but access to very, very long-term memory was a shock. And I think one of the most frightening things, probably for my friend, was that moment when she stopped recognizing her own daughter. And I think Sarah experiences that in one of the early chapters where, her father has sort of stopped recognizing her. But there is this one tiny sliver of a moment where he becomes completely lucid and asks her a direct question about something very immediate. That came from sort of anecdotal evidence, really.
This is you touched on this, but if you make it a little bit clearer, will this book be the first in a series that you're planning to write?
I did write a treatment for a second Sarah story. Depends on how successful that one is and whether there's more. But I suspect it might be more veering towards the science fiction side of it. So one of the things I realized when I started listening to the book was that it was an accident. I felt like, have I plotted the idea that someone's had this neural implant in the story, but we don't know who? It was completely accidental, but it is now the seed of a new idea. Like maybe somebody did get Neurocell implanted.
Now, if there was a pill that you could take,
If it was a pill.
yeah, that would be for
Alzheimer dementia because it's such a heavy thing for family and friends to go through.
To cure Alzheimer's.
Yeah, for
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'd probably get the thing implanted in my head as well. Effectively. Yeah, no, I mean, and it's, you know, again, I did do a bit of research, and there's a whole neurology department happening in London. There's all of this investment going into it because, again, this is another side of this study that I found fascinating, is how little we know about the brain. Is quite shocking considering how much we know about, you know, the rest of the body. And I just thought, if you could create a device that could open up those other aspects of the brain, and the way that's what that implant research is all about, is rewiring dead parts of the brain to sort of activate, you know, the other side. And I don't know, it's a whole world that I'm fascinated with. It's a rabbit hole that was nice to hold on.
Did you ever fall down like the mycelium rabbit hole of dementia and Alzheimer's?
No, what is that?
There's a lot of research happening right now using mycelium, you know, magic mushrooms, because it's a neurogenerator. So it actually heals and promotes the growth of neurons. And there's a lot of research now with magic mushrooms treating dementia and Alzheimer's with mycelium. Look at Paul Stamets.
You can try it. I mean, amazing.
If you're feeling forgetful.
But that's the thing. I suppose tapping into the subconscious, and I'm a very vivid dreamer, and I think I'm a daydreamer as well as a night dreamer. So anything that is opening that side of your brain to something which is so far away from the rational, because I think I'm not going to say as people, as a person, I look for the rational and the logical, and those doorways in your subconscious that happen in sleep or in daydreaming. It's mind blowing. Yeah. So I can see why people, you know, are interested in that line of research.
When you do your next book with Sarah Collier, let me know, and I'll hook you up with Paul Stamets, who's the world's foremost mycelium expert. He's doing amazing research in this.
Amazing. Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, actually, another little anecdote. My brother had a thing in his brain, which a nerve and a blood vessel were rubbing against each other. And he had this extraordinary operation where they basically created a little manhole in the back of his head and sort of put these Kevlar plates between, and that actually gave me the idea for how the neural implant might function. So yeah, everything is always going to be based on something that you've learned or experienced in your time.
This is a challenging question. Without giving anything away, did you ever have a different ending in mind for Geneva?
I did, and my editor went, "Not a chance in hell that's going to ever be believable." But I guess, again, trying not to give it away. I can't give it away.
Yeah, are there magic mushrooms involved?
Well, funny you should say that. No. It was just the kind of crime that you think on paper could work, but in practice would just never be believable. But I still loved the idea of it.
Did your question get asked?
Kinda. Well, no, I don't know. Why did you pick this subject, Alzheimer's, like for your book?
I think because the early idea for the story was coming from this professor, and I was digging into my sort of cinematic obsessions with Hitchcock, people like that, and just the idea of a gaslit relationship. And so I was pulling from neurology and science and into that movie, So Long at the Fair with Gene Simmons, which is a sort of a historical period film, but I just liked the idea of the warped perception of a very intelligent woman.
Do you think that having friends who had relatives with Alzheimer's had a way to fit into that too?
I think so, although I wasn't kind of imagining them in this type of situation, but the main focus was really about like what happens when you are a Nobel Prize-winning scientist and suddenly you can't trust your own brain. I just think that was the platform that I stood the story on.
Speaking of not trusting your own brain, how are you able to deal with the jet lag you must be experiencing?
You do a lot of rambling, actually. You kind of get a bit mushy in the brain. No, I'm good. I've got used to it. I know which.
Okay.
Anyone else in the room?
Oh.
Earlier you mentioned that you'll take a role, like you want to see that you read. Could you give us like an example of what that's been in your career?
So the scene where Francis Dolarhyde glues the doctor to the wheelchair, bites his face off, sets fire to him and pushes him down the hill.
I don't believe you.
You read moments like that and you think, how do you do that? So yeah, that kind of thing where you think, come on, that's ridiculous, and oh, we're going to do it. Okay.
We do it on the actor's last day of the schedule, just in case when you set them on fire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, I just love the kind of death-defying nature of certain scenes. So, yeah, they're all over the place. But another example, I suppose, is the Crucible. So there's a sort of drive to a kind of spiritual ascent in that play, which is at the very end when John Proctor kind of calls to God for his, the right to own his own name, because he's being sort of torn apart by gossip. And you think, I don't know what that feels like, and I'm going to have a crack at doing it. So, and you try every night for 12 weeks, and you don't quite get there, but you hope that you might.
We're fresh out of questions here.
Do you want to sign some books?
Yeah, let's sign some books.
Thank you, everybody.
One more time for Richard and Bryan. Thank you, everybody. Okay, hang tight for just a second, and we're going to sign books.